Hey up and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. We've got a couple of Northerners that are here every week, and we are joined by the lovely Claire Tamplin, the mindful movement coach, for a podcast episode that we've been trying to make happen for a while, but we are super pleased that Claire has been able to join us. She's not from the north. You'll hear that straight away. She's got a lovely voice. Doesn't sound like us northern monkeys, but Claire, it's really good to have you on the Edufuturists podcast. Could you just tell us a little bit about you and your story?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. I am so grateful that we've been able to make this happen, Ben. And Steve, I love both of your accents. And I think that actually picking up on accents is that essence that we are all so unique and we all have a story and our voices all deserve to be heard. And that's a lot about the essence of what I do, you know. I coin what I do the mindful movement method, and it's all about getting out of your head and into your body. So weaving and understanding the real empowerment of the neuroscience and the nervous system and bringing that into schools and shaping and changing the curriculum so emotional health and fitness is as at the forefront of the mind of maths, English, science, and all the other wonderful things on the curriculum. So previously I was an educator, I was a teacher of English, secondary school teacher for 15 years. And that's where my background lies. But for me now, it's about really pushing that understanding from a holistic curriculum and emotional health and fitness.
Love it. That's it's a journey, right? So you've gone from being an English teacher and in a high school. I was a high school teacher. Steve worked in FE, and then the transition into this more holistic conversation. One of the themes and trends at the Edufuturist Uprising, which when this comes out, it'll be that week. Looking forward to those people, celebrating with those people up in Leeds. One of the themes and the trends is around holistic education and how we need to move beyond everything just being about one or two subjects or one or two skills to see things in a more holistic sense. So we're excited to dig into what that means and what the mindful movement method means. But you've also talked about this idea of leaving teaching to become an innovator and what that looks like. Tell us a little bit about that journey. And I know we'll dig into that throughout the course of the podcast today.
So for me, it was really about stepping into my power and doing something really courageous. And this used to be something that I was really ashamed to talk about, actually. So even in essence, doing that now is stepping into my power. You know, Steve and Ben, I was the first person in my family to ever go to university. I came from quite a working class. I come from quite a working class background, and I'm really proud of that and my roots. To go to university was a huge glass ceiling for me. To then go on to become a teacher and then a lead teacher and all of the kind of accolades that came with that, which I don't want to bore you with right now because that used to be my story and that used to be my ticket to be at the table. Whereas actually what I realize now is that everything of who I was and my upbringing and who I am today is what matters now, not the awards, not the levels and the roles. And I soon discovered when I thought I was where I wanted to be that wasn't the case. I was a lead teacher of English. I was writing curriculums. I was working with the top sets and getting the best results. But actually, fundamentally, there was a huge void. And that for me was relationships and communication and emotional connection. And where I found that I was truly making the most difference wasn't about teaching for an exam. It wasn't the celebrations of the results at the end of the academic year. It was in the day to day. It was what I'd like to call the little wins. And so after some time where I experienced some loss in my personal life and then professionally as well, there were two young people in my school that I was working with at the time that lost their lives to suicide. And you know, it really made me both personally and professionally just take a step back and think, gosh, I can be the most incredible, all singing, all dancing, all smashing the targets teacher. But if I'm teaching and feeling that there's a void and I'm feeling a little bit broken and I'm teaching young people that also feel broken, what's the point? What am I showing up for? Who am I showing up for? Because you know what? I can show up and I can smash this curriculum. And next year, there's going to be someone else in power that's going to change it. And then I'm jumping through the hoops to meet that and meet that. And it was suddenly the song and dance for me became a bit of a power struggle. And I just thought, you know, this is real life. These conversations that we're having here is real life. These conversations where I've literally got a young person saying to me, gosh, miss, you've helped me so much. Like, you've really listened to me today. And I feel enough right now. Those were what gave me the buzz and the life and the joy. So I started what I coined mindful movement. And I started it originally alongside teaching. So I'd be doing my hours teaching, and then I'd be doing it at lunchtime or in my PPA. And I suddenly realized, Ben, that, you know what, these were more popular and successful than my classes. And there was a waiting list for them. And then other schools heard about it and they wanted to bring me in to do it there. And I just thought, you know, I can continue doing this alongside, which actually either one I wasn't given my best version of myself to, as well as being a mummy to two young children, or I can really practice what I preach here and just go all in. And I remember the day, you know, it was International Women's Day. And I remember the day that I handed in my notice, I was shaking. I was literally shaking. And I just thought, I just can't do this anymore. Who is the woman that I truly want to become? Who is the woman that I want my daughter to be able to look up to and think, gosh, mummy really wanted to be the change that she wanted to see in the world? And I handed in my notice to my head. And I think she thought that I was going to say, you know, I'd like a pay rise, or I'd like more work, or I'd like a new job title. I don't think she ever thought that I was brave enough to. In fact, her first question was, where are you going to? Who's poached you? And I said, no one. I'm setting this up. I'm going to work for myself. And she physically, Ben, took a step back. You could see she was like, oh, okay. Because it was the most courageous thing I'd ever done. I'd always shrunk myself. I'd always played small. I'd always followed the rules. And from that day on, I've been what I like to call a bit mindfully rebellious. And I've been disruptive in the system. And I want to shake up the system. And I want to have these courageous conversations. And in fact, on my radio show on Express FM, Cultivating Courageous Conversations, it's all about having these conversations that we don't have out loud because we're too scared that we are going against the norm. But what is the norm? The norm is only something that exists for as long as we allow it to, right? And I think that when we try and think differently and we act differently and we create change differently, beautiful things happen and co-creation happens and authenticity at its truest form happens. And that for me is why it was an act of courage. And you know what? I can't say it's all been plain sailing. It absolutely hasn't. But I have never looked back. And the wealth of young people that I have impacted and the places and the people and the buzz and the energy is just what drives me every single day. And even being here now, what a joy to be able to talk about what we're so passionate about.
A couple of points. I jumped in early. I knew Ben was going to mute, so I'm going to jump in. Ben, you're going to have to mark this one as explicit. Fucking love it. Absolutely love it. Just putting it out there. Absolutely fucking love it. A couple of things. We had a couple of guys on the podcast talking about the working class focus. They'd written a book. Ben's going to absolutely have a go at me because behind the scenes I can't remember what it is. Mind what the book was called, Ben?
The Working Classroom.
Working Classroom. I thought I was going to get it
I
wrong.
love that.
Absolutely unbelievable. Because what you said is I came from working class. I came from where I was, and I'm thinking she's going to say that she's glad that she moved out of it. I think what they talked about is this, and I'm so proud of myself. The fact that you said I identify as working class. My dad came from real poverty. For whatever reason, I'm not going to get into it and start getting upset on the podcast. But my dad came from real poverty, and I'm proud of my working class roots. So I love the fact that that's something that you stand by and something that you champion as well, because I think we're all working class people here on the podcast. The other thing was that real tenacity of these are my non-negotiables. This is how I fill my cup up. This is my why. And this is what I'm going to drive towards. I think there's a real fear for people in education because they don't think they can do anything else. There's a lot of people that are leaving it but maybe they're just leaving it with nothing else. But I think that a lot of it, you're thinking, well, I've been in education, I've been a teacher, I was in education system for 17 years, and I couldn't really think what I'd do beyond it until it happened. But I love the fact that we need to start to think about non-negotiables. I think if we look at a conversation that we're going to have on the 11th of July around called the War for Teachers, the Edufuturist Uprising, is that round of, would as many people leave if they stood by their non-negotiables, and that was family time on a Friday evening, Saturday and Sunday, where they just said, if I can't get it done, I'm not going to do the 5 hours on a Sunday? Or do they feel they're burnt out and they can't juggle both? Or is it the fact, do you feel, and would you have stayed, if that conflict between what you want to do and what you're doing now, would you have stepped into it and taken a longer step out of education, do you feel, if education wouldn't have been as restrictive to then say, you have to work 5 days, you have to commit everything to us, and you have to maybe do this as a real small percentage on top of everything? Do you think that's a problem in education, that there is no side hustles and either or, where in a lot of industries you can be a creative and you can be a educator and you can be a mentor and you can do loads of different things, but as a teacher you have to sign a document in HR to then say, I'm not going to do anything else because there's a conflict? Would that not drive a better education system? And maybe your thoughts on that, really.
You know what? I think for me, it's 3-tier, and this is only my personal experience. So I want to go back to the working class thing first of all, because, you know, I talked about that I was the first person in uni, in my family to ever go to uni. All my sisters have now gone, by the way. And so when you're a teacher and you leave university and you leave teaching, I think you actually pave the way to let other teachers know that there is another route and there is a way. And that's why conversations like this are so blooming powerful, because it's so important that we're not stuck. You know, we're not only as good as our next review or objective setting or whatever we feel trapped in at the time. We are so much more than our job titles. And a really dear friend of mine, Dr. Alicia Damani, she is a doctor who's left the medical world to do holistic health. And she talks about we are multifaceted human beings. And, you know, Steve, I remember telling my head that I was starting a radio show, and I actually wanted to interview some of the young people. And her response was, why? You know, why do you want to be a radio presenter? You're a teacher. And I thought, well, I'm also a mum, and I'm also a super creative thinker, and I'm also a reader, and I'm also a writer. But actually, I feel that there's this kind of narrow-mindedness in teaching, that you are a teacher, and so that is what all of your time goes into. I also think, and Ben, you and I have talked about this before, about how our brains think differently. I think that there is a lot more flexibility for that in teaching right now. But when you are a super creative thinker, and by the way, I'm proud to be dyslexic and ADHD, and that's not something that I want to pin a label on constantly, but it's something that I want to air and share, because for years I was diagnosed at university, I hid it. And I was told that I'd never be able to be an English teacher because I was dyslexic. And it's only because that I refused to hang up on the Chancellor. For 3 hours, I stayed on the phone until his PA would put me through, that I was given a shot to go onto the PGCE. And I got the highest mark on the PGCE, and I've now taught on that same PGCE at the University of Portsmouth that they wouldn't let me in on the course for. I've now delivered that course for 11 years to teachers. And one of the messages that I share to them is, you know what, I have been a teacher and I have left teaching, but I still see you and I support you, because we need teachers. But we need to be more open with the different types of thinkers that are going into teaching. Because here's the thing that's profound for me. We're working with different types of learners. And so it cannot be, this is the only way to teach. This is the standards that you need to hit. This is the curriculum that you need to teach. So that's the second thing for me. And the third thing is, for me personally, a really great mentor talked to me once about fossil fuel and how our energy and our time are our greatest currency. But they are also like fossil fuel. Once we've spent them, they're gone. For me, life as a teacher, I was constantly in debt. I had no currency. I had no time to do things like this. I mean, would I fit this into a PPA? We'd be here talking right now? Absolutely not. Didn't have time to have a wee, you know? But actually, in terms of spending your energy and your time, it's just you're constantly in debt. You're constantly looking for those small windows and small gaps. And I think that what I want to do right now is shout out those that are in the classroom still, that have an abundance of ideas, that have an abundance of creativity, but feel trapped by the system that doesn't allow them to grow, that doesn't allow them to develop, that doesn't allow them to share, that they feel that they're constantly pushing against a system that is shrinking them. So for me, those elements were just not conducive for me staying there. But for those that are staying there, I literally have so much admiration and respect for, and I support on a day-to-day basis. It's not just young people that I deliver my mindful method to. It's also head teachers, it's senior leadership team, it's staff members across a range of schools, because those systems and those communities that understand emotional health and fitness, they are making the change. And I'm proud and I'm passionate to be a part of those communities that are doing so.
And I love this. I love it. I love these kind of conversations where there's a super resonance. Like, you get a resonance. Lots of people are like, yeah, we're going to do something different. And we've had some great conversations. But then you just know these people are on the same page, right? And the conversation that you're talking about there of being brave and daring greatly and courageous conversations, all the stuff that you've talked about there, that we probably read the same books, we listen to the same people, we're passionate about that. And actually, you talked about that idea of paving the way for others, and I've always been passionate, probably since I watched Coach Carter. Actually, the great film, when he talks about that idea of like our deepest fear, and he uses that Marianne Williamson quote about our deepest fear and about who are we to not be brilliant, and that conversation around actually it's because when we let our own light shine, we give permission to other people for them to be who they are. And I love that how you've moved into that, and that movement out of education. I reckon I've probably spoken to, in the last 3 years since I became self-employed fully, I think I've probably spoken to well over 100 people who were saying, you left teaching, I'm thinking about, and it's either don't do it, it's this is the reality of what it means to be self-employed. But more often it's like, okay, what's in your heart? What matters to you? Is it about making as much money as you can, or is it about having more time with your kids? Is it about saving your marriage? Is it about saving yourself from burnout and whatever else, depression that sits with it? So I think it's super. Said super about 27 times, but I think it's really important what you're saying, and what that's then led into, obviously, is yes, you've made pathways for other people and blazed a trail for other people. Yes, you've gone back into that PGC. I love that, by the way. Like, it's almost like sticking two fingers up at a system in a really lovely way by going, you said no to me, but now look, now you pay me to do it.
You know what, Ben? You can get bitter or you can get better. And for me, it's all about better. And I love, you've hit the nail on the head. And I don't know if you're aware, but you've said the word we 3 times. And I feel that it's not about you. It's not about me. It's all about we. And when you operate from a place that there's an abundance of togetherness and unity and co-creation for everyone, you almost obliterate that disconnect between heads, senior leaders, middle managers, all of that. Because to have emotional intelligence, it's about working collectively, right? And that's with our learners too. And it's about listening. And, you know, the latest research with mental health and emotional health with young people is that what makes the biggest impact is not necessarily what's on the curriculum, you know, from yoga, which, by the way, you know, I teach yoga, I love it. It's not music classes, it's not cycling, it's how heard and seen they feel. And I think that in itself is just the same for teachers. If I had someone sit down and talk to me and say, you know what are you passionate about? What could you create? How could you make a difference? Rather than writing proposals and then having, sorry, we've not had a chance to even read it yet. And that's the irony, is that the people that you want to approve it are stuck in the system too. It's not that, you know, they've gone in it for the right reasons too. This isn't about kind of, you know, dragging anyone's name through the mud. I truly believe everyone in education wants to make a difference. but we're all a victim of the circumstance that there is only enough hours in the day. We all have families, we all have our to-dos, but we're human beings, not human doings, and we lose that complete essence of being.
I've just had that. I've just come off a coaching session with a guy who runs a charity up in Liverpool, and it's working with people who dealing with social anxiety. A lot of those people are from the autistic community, and he's autistic himself. And he said this phrase, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. It just resonated as you're talking there. He said, I'm just sick of sitting at tables, so I'm going to shout from rooftops. This is an autistic guy. And I was like, I like that. I was like, I might make a T-shirt with that on, but I'll put your name on underneath it. But like shouting from rooftops. But it's this idea that he said, why are non-autistic people telling me as an autistic person how to live? Why are white people telling me as a non-white person? Why are males telling me as a all these things? Like there's this system that says there's not space at the table for you, and realistically, we need to smash those ceilings that you talked about. We need to get rid of the tables, and we need to let people be at a place where we can genuinely be who we're supposed to be. And I think part of what you're talking about in terms of that mindful movement and that idea of holistic education and just being authentic self is about it's about understanding that you do have a place. And whether you're a teacher or not a teacher, whether you are a student or you've left education, but you're still a student of life, full stop anyway. But it's that idea of what you're trying to do in terms of your work in that space allows people to almost connect to what they want to achieve. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about that what mindful movement means. Give us some examples. And I know that before we came on a podcast, we were starting in that space, right?
Yeah,
so I'd love to hear from you.
So just to add to what you said about shouting from the rooftops, here's what I'm prepared to take a stand in and showing up authentically. You know what? I see the irony that we're talking as former teachers about. I make it really clear. Ofsted once quoted that I was an outstanding teacher with sheer vibrancy. I was the most bleakest and darkest and unshininess that I'd ever been in that moment. I was literally drowning in cortisol. I was so stressed. And yet that's what they deemed me as in that moment. And I am absolutely unapologetically authentic when I say I cannot be in the classroom. I cannot be a teacher the way that I want to. And some might say, you can't hack it. And they are absolutely right. I can't. And I'm not afraid to say that. And this is me standing in my power and saying, I can't hack it the way that it is. So I'm creating a new pathway the way that it could be. And I'm opening up, endless possibilities for those that can't hack it too, because the burnout rates speak for themselves. I was speaking at a heads conference a couple of weeks ago, the leaders in education, and I got them through mindful movement to start by raising your hands. How many of you are thriving? How many of you are surviving? You can imagine the response, right? And these are the leaders of our communities. So going back to what you said, completely flawed, completely imperfect, as is my mindful movement method. It's something that's continuously evolving. When I first set out to do this, Ben, it was only for young people. I wanted to work, and I've been really, really gratefully trained. I want to shout out the Teen Yoga Foundation, Dr. Dan Siegel, global leading neuroscientist, where I learned about the teen brain. And I learned about the stages of what goes on, because here's another ironic thing, right? We are teaching to an organ in the brain, the mind. We are expecting it to retain information, and yet we're not teaching young people. And I put my hands up myself. We don't know enough about it ourselves. So we are literally learning content externally, but learning not a lot internally. You think maybe biology, we might learn a little bit about the nervous system and the neuroscience, and that's it. So we're walking encyclopedias of all things, Shakespeare and all of that, but we know so little about ourselves. But then we're holding ourselves to such high standards and accountability when it comes to interaction and relationships and connection. And in order to connect with others, we really need to be able to connect to ourselves. So mindful movement with me, I coined the phrase getting out of your head and into your body. And we know through trauma, through understanding the body holds the score. And it's something that I like to call the paperclip concept. You might have heard about this before. And I would see this played out day to day to day in classrooms. And also, by the way, more than in classrooms, in the staff room. So you've woken up, you've snoozed your alarm because you've been up all night marking. Or let's say you're a young person, you've been on Snapchat, chatting, trying to connect to people, you're tired, you wake up, you miss your bus, you're the adult, you're stuck in traffic. All of the things that go wrong day to day. And then you drop a paperclip on the floor and you explode. And it's not about the paperclip that you've dropped. It's about all of those micro moments of stress, of cortisol that have built up and up and up. And what happens in that explosion, you're then, a circumstance, a situation, and it just completely railroads you into a whole different dynamic, from aggression to, taking bad decisions, to escapism, to all of those things. But mindful movement for me is being present. And by the way, I don't do this myself all the time. I can call myself out on it like I just did. But I really want to make it clear that I'm so imperfectly flawed in this. And that's the beauty of it, because we all are. But as a lifelong learner, those flaws for me, that imperfection, is an opportunity to keep growing and keep evolving and keep learning. So this is not from a place of preaching. This is from a place of let's grow, let's learn together. Mindful movement is about managing and being aware more so, and elevating to awareness those micro moments. So you know what? I'm sat in traffic right now, Ben. I'm feeling a little bit triggered. I'm running late. I'm feeling a bit sweaty. My heart's beating fast. What am I going to do in this moment? How can I reframe that in this moment? Into continuing that cortisol cycle into then my exchange with a colleague, where I'm really sharp and I'm really snappy with them. So it's about awareness, and it's about being mindful through our movement. So many people think, and there are moments where, I'm up on stage and I'm moving and I'm getting people to understand how movement is the medicine, but it's also moving introspectively as well. It's reframing. It's about understanding how we're feeling inside, because so much, and I say this with the greatest respect, so much of our world, on our phones, how we look, we're constantly validating ourselves externally. But mindful movement for me is about coming home to yourself. It's about who you are when you sit in that moment where you really are able to sit in the mess of life as well as the joys of life. And it's about understanding that all emotions, Tony Robbins talks about energy in motion, is moving all the time. It will all pass, but it all serves a purpose. I grew up in quite a chaotic home as a young person. And for me, I grew up thinking that anger was a really bad thing. So even into my early adulthood, when I was around conflict, I would shrink myself. I would get really worried. I'd back down. But it took me a while to understand and learn that what's on the other side of anger. When I feel angry, it's because there's a need that's unmet. So when we're teaching young people, don't be angry, take a deep breath. Actually, what we could be using it as an opportunity to is, why am I feeling angry? Am I hungry? Am I feeling there's a sense of disjustice? Am I feeling not seen and heard? And it's about having these conversations through mindful movement that we just don't always think to have, and have that time and energy to have. In essence, it's emotional articulation, and it's really feeling, and it's about walking alongside people as opposed to being toe to toe with them. This is what you need to do. This is what you must do. And that's the essence of coaching, right? Is you are constantly walking alongside someone through all evolutions of emotions.
Love it. I think imperfection needs to be championed.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have, in education, created a focus on perfection, where children and our young people get to a certain point and feel like they failed, and that's devastating for me. I think somebody was telling me the story, I think about a week ago, of a young person that ended up committing suicide because of an exam result. and you just think, do you know, how did we create a system of feeling that perfect has to be attained at that point in time? And I think that, as you were telling that story, that going back to, I don't always get it right, imperfect, I think I'm going to probably get this word wrong, but ambiguous? Ambiguous is what the world is. And I think it's uncertain. I think it's very different from day to day, from hour to hour. And I think we have to try and support our young people, our leaders, and everybody really to have an understanding of sometimes you're going to do absolutely exceptional. Sometimes you're going to really give it your best shot and you're going to really fail hard. But it's all right. Ultimately, you know, do it with kindness in your heart. Do it with your best intentions always. But ultimately, and I think it was probably on Instagram, where, and I've seen this quote going round quite a bit, where it's like, if you're the best that you can give that day is 40%, and you achieve 40%, then 100%, you've give 100% of that day.
Yeah.
And maybe I've absolutely killed somebody's quote there, which I do on a regular basis, but I think, because I'm imperfect, but I think it's that whole thing of getting people to understand, being mindful of errors that they make, but also be mindful to celebrate themselves and be very un-British in terms of celebrating successes and themselves when they've done things well. And I think what I loved about that story was trying to get people to thrive. You left the classroom because you feel it's focused in the wrong areas, and what you wanted to do was coach, not tell and mentor often. And I think I tell my story when people say, would you ever go back to the classroom? And I say no. And I said, I feel I've got a better opportunity and a better chance of being an exceptional leader, CEO, and the different things that I now do compared to an outstanding teacher based on what my parameters and expectations I set myself, because I just felt it was unachievable when I stepped outside of the classroom. So I love the fact that, and I'm going to step onto another bit that I know that you've been doing quite a little bit of work on, is I was involved as a chair of governors for quite a few years, and the reason I didn't want to, I'd left a governor role. I had 2 young children, and I said, I can't give any more because I don't want to always shape the lives of other young people when I can't really do it with the children in my own home. So, but I was dragged back into it through passion, and somebody, they knew, they must have had a conversation with somebody and said, I know what's going to drag him back in and is going to keep him here, or going to take his role. And they said,
yeah, mate, I feel that pain.
Yeah. So, and I couldn't give any more, but they said, we don't want to just deliver a normal education in this primary school. We want to create change makers. And I said, tell me a bit more about, what do you mean by that?
You were hooked in that moment.
Oh, scandalous. I was like, who's done this? I was like, my wife's had a conversation with these people here, because they knew that's what was going to keep me, or going to drive me to be chair. So, Changemaker, I'm going to ask your opinion of what you think that word means. But for me, Changemaker isn't for those young people that are probably in an area of Leeds or an area of Portsmouth or an area of Accrington, where you're going and you don't see anything beyond just being an outstanding dad or mum, an outstanding person that gives into the community or the church, or just goes and does exceptional in terms of being a nurse or a teacher or anything. A change maker is in your own life, and the impact that you can have is making a change in everything that you do. You don't have to aspire to be the Prime Minister or the King, which is never going to happen. But anything else, change is what you make it at every level. And that's my interpretation. I know you've been involved in lots of different avenues around these challenges and Changemaker opportunities. Do you want to step into that? What does Changemaker mean to you, and how did you step into that space?
You know, I think for me, the most impactful way to make change is to share and lean into vulnerability and use your voice. End of. And I think that in itself cultivates the right tribe, the right people around you to turn those voices into action. Because what happens if you're trying to make change on your own is that suddenly you get stuck in your head again, and you talk about the problems and the issues. For me, change making is about community, and it's about service, and it's about supporting and championing. And sometimes that might just look like hearing and listening. That too is change. change isn't always about, driving things forward and, like you said, completely changing the game. Change can be baby steps. And actually, 2 examples that I'll give you of change that I feel really, really proud to have been a part of was last year and the year before, I was invited to speak at Parliament about how we can create change on a national level with wellbeing across the curriculum. And without mentioning any names, I was approached after and told, you know what, Claire, what you're doing is incredible. Mindful movement method needs to be in every single school. The data, the research, we've got the leading psychiatrists, psychologists from Great Ormond Street. We've got Harvard University. We've got the Teen Yoga Fund. We've got every kind of science-backed foundations and collectives that could be sat around one table. But I was literally told, until you can prove that this is saving money, not lives, we can't support what you're doing. So that's one example of me being a change maker, but really just blowing hot air around a table, if I'm being really authentic and honest with you. And like, I can feel the rage firing up in me now, because the preparation, the fire in my belly that I'd conjured up to turn up, little old me, never even been to uni, I'm suddenly speaking in Parliament. The deflation that I felt after that day, I cannot even begin to tell you. Last Friday, I was invited to my local university where I'm an entrepreneur in residence to talk about, at what they called the Changemakers Challenge. And this was not a lot of MPs sat around a table and leaders. This was young people. And this was them given a task where they had to create and solve a problem for a very real problem going on our earth, on our planet, and create change. And the buzz, the feeling, the excitement, the vibrancy in the room after that day of literally listening to the voices of young people and genuinely, from like a physiological point of view, watching them come in pretty kind of chill to literally leaving like that, their shoulders down, their heads up, the sparkle in their eyes. That for me was being a change maker, and being a change maker with other change makers who have a lot more wisdom and insight than me. It's that essence of, the teacher becomes the student becomes the teacher, and that ebb and that flow. So for me, being a change maker is about surrounding myself with people that want to create real change, not just talk about it. But it's also about using your voice and having the courage to cultivate that change too, because you know what, it is uncomfortable. And when I was invited back again, I politely declined the invitation, because the biggest change that I can be is in my hometown right now, and then rolling it out in other boroughs and talking about it and meeting up with people like yourself to cultivate that change from a ground level. Because we can spend so much time trying to create change, and then there's a new party in power, a little bit like the curriculum, and then we're jumping through hoops again to meet that change. Or we can be the change that we want to see, attract the right people around us, and then it naturally evolves. Some of the projects that I'm working on right now where this has literally been embodied. Next Saturday, I am running the Wellbeing Festival at the Young Carers Festival. So the YMCA nationally, they champion all young carers. And when we think about wellbeing for our youngest hearts and minds, those that are literally having, issues that as adults we would struggle with, right? They're supporting adults in their lives on a number of, physical, emotional, mental, financial. And for a weekend, they get to come and be a child again. And I've got a tent there, the wellbeing tent, and they get to learn breath work. It's my 3rd year doing it. They get to dance and move through mindful movement. We get to write poetry. We get to create art. We get to literally just completely, and one of the phrases that I use is let go of expectation, lean into liberation. They get to be liberated for a whole weekend where they can just completely be themselves. That's making a change. I'm also working at the World Yoga Festival for the 2nd time, running the teen arena. So this is a huge deal for me, to be invited to work at the World Yoga Festival. There are swamis there that I can only, to be in their presence is a blessing, let alone to be, headlining with them. I'm running the teen arena and the family arena. And there will be people from all walks of life where I'm leading and leaning into my mindful movement. That is, again, being a change maker, knowing that all of these people on Henley-on-Thames are going to take away a little slice of that and integrate it into their families around their table. And the last one that I want to share was last week. Many schools have rules where you're not able to get your devices out, you're not able to get your phones out. And I was working in a school last week, and there was a young girl, and she was really, really kind of getting her phone out, filming the work. And I said to her, I'm so sorry, darling, but her teacher had said, get her to put her phone away. I said, I'm really sorry, darling, but I'm going to have to ask you to put that away. And she said, Claire, I'm really, really sorry. I don't mean to break the rules, but what you're teaching right now, I want to film because my mum's at home and she's really depressed, and I know this would really help her. And my heart, guys, in that moment was like, oh, you are a change maker. This little girl was a change maker because she was so selflessly not being present in the moment, because she was thinking, gosh, this is going to help my mummy. And for me, we are surrounded by change makers of all ages within all communities. And it's just about, and you talked about it being uncomfortable. We're seeking certainty, we're seeking predictability, and life is not like that. But here's the thing, and this is what Brené Brown talks about a lot. What's the opposite of comfort? Is courage. And when we talk about living a life courageously, we're living it from a place of heart. And I think when you are a change maker, and you know, the English teacher in me, the Latin word for heart, courage. When we live courageously, we're living from a place of heart, and that for me is the biggest change that we can make.
Yeah, there's no response to that other than it's incredible. Like, making change, helping people make change, being the change that you want to see. The work that you're doing is not just about, let's just do some yoga. The yoga is there to then make a difference in their lives, and as a vehicle to help them, and as a coping strategy, but also as a lifestyle strategy, something you can pass on to other people, or whether it's breath work or whatever else that looks like. And by the way, that Young Carers Festival sounds like something. Sounds like just wonderful.
It is a vibe. And you know what? Last year I was really, really grateful, and I'm going to shout him out now. Someone that's endorsed me, Joe Wicks, the body coach. Joe has been was a young carer growing up, and when he found out that I was opening the Young Carers Festival, he recorded a video for them, which was so vulnerable and so uncomfortable and so courageous, basically saying to them, I see every single one of you. Like, you deserve, you are worthy to have this weekend for you. And it was kind of like the little girl in me, the inner girl in me was so triggered and just emotionally kind of stirred to really show up and be the best that I could be for all these children. And I think that actually, circling back to being a change maker, it's about connecting to your inner child. What do we need to change? Because we don't change from a place of ego, we change from a place of heart. And I think that's when we're able to drop out of here and really drop into our bodies. And we feel when something feels uncomfortable, right? We feel when change needs to happen. And I think that listening to that and having that awareness is so powerful.
Couldn't agree more. That that level of awareness, other awareness, self-awareness, environment awareness. We don't do awareness particularly well, unless it's for a ulterior motive. Like, I was angry for you when you said that, unless it's going to save money rather than saving lives. But I feel like I could just get angry and ranty around politics and finance and all the stuff that goes with it. But we won't. We'll save that for the Uprising Awards, where I usually get like that. But and it'll be a week after the election, so we'll know that where we're going to be sat. I was super. I'm gonna be honest, be vulnerable. I was super jealous when you posted out something on social media a few months ago about somebody you'd met.
I know. So, like you, I was invited along to the Life and Business show, and I was able to meet with him before and to share with him a little bit about my journey, my mission, and cultivating change. And fortunately for me, Stephen is not a stranger to breath work and to understanding all of these things because of other things that he's involved in. And as a young entrepreneur who, for me, is just, you know, absolutely smashing it in so many areas, I, like you, wanted to know, is he as inspirational in real life? And the answer is yes. And you know what was the most inspirational for me is that he listened. He wasn't about telling you all about him. He listened. And when I mean listen, like the eye contact, the intentional listening, the meaningful questions that were asked that really showed you that he was listening. You know, quite often when we talk about listening actively and so on, we're already subconsciously thinking about what we're going to say next, right? And it comes back to that essence of being present, of owning and saying, gosh, can you just say that again? That I needed that to land a minute. And for me, what was so inspirational about him was how he listened and how he gave his time. You know, an hour before he's about to go on stage to, 500 people and give the show of his life, he's still listening and taking on board and supporting and championing. So, yeah, he is absolutely as inspirational in real life. And what for me was so humbling was the feedback that he gave me about mindful movement. And you know, how mindful movement plays out is, yes, it's yoga, it's Tai Chi. I talk a lot. So my mum's Irish and my dad's Indian. So for me, it's this real fusion of kind of Eastern meets West approach to storytelling, movement, music. And when I was talking him through that, it was very, very obvious that was something that he was passionate about too, is that bringing together our heritage, bringing together our stories and using it as a platform to get others to use theirs too. And one of the quotations that I put on my post was that he just said, now is the time. And for me, that was such a kind of, right, okay, I can't just sit on this anymore. I can't just sit with these ideas. I need to push forward. And without going into too much, he's been a real source of support and just completely, goes back to my own child, right? To feel seen and heard by someone that we're, fanning over and looking up to. And he was interviewing some of the most global leaders out there, innovators and creators. I think for them to say, you've got a good idea. Wow. That really gives you the courage to keep going.
Taking 10 minutes to unmute, but that's absolutely fine. It's fine. You talked about inspiration to you, but I'm going to call out Inspirational Women of Portsmouth. So not only that award, or potential award, but the Edufuturists award coming up as well.
Yes.
Ego is not driving you, but it's fantastic that by making change and by leaning by your heart and doing what you think is passionate and what you think is right, that other people are recognising that and celebrating to then say that actually, this is something that other people should be supporting with. So kudos to that. Tell us a bit about what that means to you.
So what I love about Pomodzi community, who created the Inspirational Women's Awards, is that they don't call anyone winners, they call them recipients. Oh, I can't say it now, I'm going to get tongue-tied. Recipients. And the reason for that is because everyone that is nominated is a winner in their eyes. And I received the award for my service in education and mental health and education in 2022. And that for me just created a platform and gave me a voice to be able to share what I was doing. And then last year I was able to present at the awards and hand that down to someone else. We talked off air before about leaving a legacy and paving a way. And what was so profound for me, was that the person that received the award the year after me said the exact same thing to me that I said to someone else. And that is, I don't feel worthy of this. I have such imposter syndrome. And when you are deeply creative and introspective and you really want to make a change in the world, the chances are you're quite emotionally led. And that's a blessing and a curse, because sometimes we can get stuck in our own head. And what I love about talking about this right now is, and I feel it now, that I'm clamming up, like I'm not good at championing myself, but why I feel the award is so successful is that it allows you to champion yourself, but it allows you to create a tribe around you, and you'll indirectly champion others. So when you're championing others, it circles back to you again. And yes, the award was given to me, but every single person that was nominated in that category was championed too. And I think that is about the we again, right? That is about the bigger picture. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about we. And when we are standing up on that stage and talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, who knows who's sat in that audience who we're inspiring to actually think, do you know what, I'm going to take that leap of faith and do my idea too. Because we've all been inspired by someone, right? Even Stephen Bartlett. So I think that, yes, the award was life-changing for me in terms of how actually I received the award a month after I handed my notice in. And that for me, to resign from teaching to then receive that award was a night and day moment, and was just such a moment of pride for me, and a sign that I was doing exactly what I needed to be doing. So yeah, it was something that I look back on with huge pride, but also more so gratitude that it's allowed me to just kind of keep focusing on my North Star, and that is to always drive change positively and impact my community like the awards do.
And I suppose it's like a validation. Not that we need validation, but it's always nice to get validation. If you chase the validation first without the values, then that's where we get ourselves unstuck. And it's very clear that you've been values-led and then validation followed. Oh, look at that. There it is. Values-led and validation followed. You can have that. Like, whoever's listening to this, somebody else can have that. Put that on a T-shirt. You can have it.
But you know what? The validation to use your voice. There's
the V's, 3 V's. There we go. Yeah.
And you know what? In using my voice, circling back, I was able to share my core values. And you know what changed for me then was I was constantly, the year before, in my first year of self-employment, knocking on the doors of schools continuously, wanting to kind of showcase my mindful movement method. The moment that I received that award, I had schools coming to me. And I think that that's where the validation comes into play, that it allows you to have a platform, and it allows you to create that trust and that community and that recognition, but in a wholesome way, not in an ego-driven way.
For sure. Yeah, it's why we do what we do in some ways, try and help other people, give them people platform. And we know that the same measure that you use, it'll be measured back to you. And so you just keep pushing the right direction. Just as we kind of come towards a close for this, and we really appreciate the time, it feels like, I'm going to use a Steve phrase. It's one of those phrases where we could talk all night. It feels like one of those that there's lots and lots that we could dig into. But as we close the podcast, what we've moved into in this series is asking 3 quick fire questions. We don't give these in advance, they're quick fire. And so some people don't like it because they feel like they're on the spot. So hopefully you're not getting more clammy. Love it. Hey, it's a good word. Clammy is a good word. But the 3 quick fire questions. And we mixed them up recently, so even if you've listened, you won't know what they are. So here we go. So the first question is crystal ball time. In 5 words or something similar, what do you think the single most important skill that students will need to thrive in the future workforce?
Creativity, connectivity, courage, community, and clarity.
Steve's just looking for the second quick fire question.
I can't find the
quick fire question.
Ben, you go second, I'll go third. Oh my days, I am so terrible.
The second quick fire question is this. We can edit this bit out for you, Steve. Don't worry. We won't. I'm going to leave it in so everybody sees it.
We are, right?
You're enough, Steve. You're enough. Love you, man. The second question is, if we can imagine this completely transformed education system, okay, well, that's what we all want. That's holistic. Pick one surprising element. What do you think the surprising element would be, and tell us why it excites you?
That every day the school day is starting operating from a place of gratitude. So rather than saying almost in this militant form, names like in an army, yes, miss, you're late, you haven't got your pen. Everyone sits down and they literally talk about what they're grateful for. And they operate from a place of gratitude, which heart health, heart coherence, dropping out of your head and into your body, creates community, but also allows people to be present, which is the most beneficial, powerful state for learning to take place.
Okay. So we're all striving for the future of education and the dream of what we want it to be. What do you think are the biggest challenges from preventing that in the next 10 to 20 years?
I mean, I think the most obvious is that we don't know what the workforce in the future is going to look like. We're in an ever-evolving world. And, Sir Ken Robinson talks about killing creativity. Schools are very much set up for an industrial revolution rather than agricultural and growth and evolution. That said, I think that the biggest barrier is that we're not giving our young people the time to evolve. Going back to Stephen Bartlett, one of his right-hand women are not head of ops, not head of, it's head of failure. And one of the things that he talked to me about was what advice he'd give me was to fail, because it is the key component to success. And I think in answer to your question, we don't allow our young people time to fail. And that's what we need more time to do in order to create and truly learn with conviction.
Love it. I actually wrote an article just last week about Stephen Bartlett talking about his head of failure. So it wraps it up really lovely. We need to create time to fail. Claire, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And I know that I hope that this won't be the last time and that we can look at how we can champion the work that you're doing and let people know more and more about this. Just as a final wrap up, if people want to find out a little bit more about you, where's the best place for them to do that?
So on socials at The Mindful Movement Coach, they can find out about my radio show on Express FM, Cultivating Courageous Conversations, and I'm also on LinkedIn as well.
Love it. Thanks, Claire. And we'll speak very soon.